There are runways we keep open not for planes but for the ghosts that taught us to fly. What if the one place no one cared about turned out to be the only place that could save everything? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe for more veteran stories that deserve to be heard. Russell Stevenson wasn't the kind of man who filled silence with stories. He carried his memories like spare ammo, tightly packed, rarely drawn, and always ready if needed. His hands, leathered from time and labor, gripped the edge of a rusted workbench inside a half-collapsed hangar that smelled of pine oil and soaked gravel. A nearby radio buzzed in and out with old country tunes, but Russell paid it no mind. He was busy scraping corrosion off a tool that hadn't been used in at least a decade. Most men his age would have sold the land by now, maybe moved in with their kids, or worse, into one of those places with linoleum floors and scheduled group activities. But Russell? He stayed. Because this stretch of land, flat, stubborn, and cracked like the backs of his hands, wasn't just dirt and dust. It was sacred, not in the flag-waving, tear-jerker kind of way. No, it was sacred because it had been promised. Not to God, not even to his father, but to the sky. He didn't talk about the letter from the bank anymore. It had come 3 months ago, neat and cruel in its phrasing, like a stranger asking for your coat while you're still shivering in it. Foreclosure. The word itself sounded like a locked door, and yet, every morning, Russell came out here, rolled open the groaning hangar doors, walked the gravel strip like it was a wounded friend, cleared brush, brushed dust from faded painted lines. Some folks thought he was crazy, others thought he was just too proud to give up. And they were all right. What they didn't know was that once, long ago, this airstrip had mattered. Not to the world, not to the government, but to a boy who watched a jet carve the sky like it meant something, and later became a man who believed the ground should always be ready for its return. The last aircraft to touch down here was a Piper Super Cub, 15 years ago. Russell still remembered the way it sounded, clumsy but confident. He wasn't flying that day, just guiding a student down, one hand raised like he was conducting an orchestra that only he could hear. Since then, the world got louder and this place got quieter. Until now. He sensed something, not in a prophetic way. Russell didn't believe in signs, omens, or that universe has a plan nonsense. But in his gut, right where instinct lives, he knew the air felt different, tighter, like it was holding its breath. That afternoon, he was under the hood of a busted four-wheeler, elbow-deep in grease, when a pair of boots crunched on the gravel behind him. "You Russell Stevenson," a voice called out. Young, crisp, federal. Russell didn't lift his head. "Depends who's asking." Sergeant First Class Eli Ramsey, U.S. Air Force. The man stepped into view, uniform dusty but immaculate. He wasn't here for small talk. "We need to speak." Russell slowly straightened up, wiping his hands on an old rag. "Not recruiting, are you?" Ramsey cracked a smile, barely. "No, sir. I'm here about your airstrip." Russell's eyes narrowed. "You with the bank?" "No, sir. I'm at the 445th Airlift Wing, Wright-Patterson. You're probably not going to like what I have to say, but I need your permission before I say it." That got Russell's attention. He gestured to a dented folding chair, then took a seat on a nearby crate. "Say it anyway. There's a medical transport C-17 Globemaster III. Critical equipment on board for FEMA response. It was en route to Boise, but got diverted. Weather turned violent up north. They're trying to bring her down somewhere safe." Russell raised an eyebrow. "And you're looking at this strip?" Ramsey hesitated. "It's technically not certified anymore. FAA pulled it from the registry. But it's on our emergency file, archived under legacy sites. Your name was next to it. When command asked if it was viable, I said maybe." "Maybe," Russell grunted. "That plane's 4 times the size of anything this strip's seen." "I know," Ramsey said. "But if she doesn't land somewhere soon, those supplies won't matter. It's not about comfort. It's about survival. Russell stared at him, reading the space between his words. Who's the pilot? Ramsey shifted. Captain Dana Blake. The name didn't register, and Russell could tell. But I'm co-pilot, Ramsey added, and I've been here before. 30 years ago, you took me up. My uncle worked your crops one summer. I watched you fly that yellow cub like it was part of your bones. Russell looked away out toward the run. The memory landed slowly, like dust on a windshield. I was the kid who stood on the hill every afternoon, waving. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, you still wave? Ramsey smiled. Only when it matters. Russell stood, walked past him without a word, went into the hangar, and came out dragging a rusted radio tower base by the ankles. If they're coming, he said, we need comms, and I need 40 minutes to prep the strip. You've got that long? Ramsey exhaled, part relief, part awe. You'll do it. Russell didn't look back. Didn't keep this place alive for ghosts, son. Kept it alive for landings like this. And with that, the airstrip, forgotten by maps, neglected by men, but never abandoned by Russell Stevenson, began to breathe again. Russell didn't rush. Rushing was for people who hadn't made peace with the ticking clock. He moved like the earth owed him time, but every motion was precise, intentional. He knew exactly which weeds to tear, which rocks to shift, and where the soft ground would betray a heavy wheel. The shovel in his hand was older than Captain Ramsey, its handle polished smooth from years of labor, and though arthritis barked at his joints with each thrust, he didn't stop. Pain was nothing new. It was an old roommate that never moved out. The airstrip itself was about 1,200 feet of gravel, cleared long ago by his father with little more than a tractor and determination. Russell had repacked the surface more times than he could count. He could still hear his father's voice from those long-ago days. A runway's not for planes, son. It's for people. Planes just happen to need 'em. The words echoed now as he bent over and pulled a twisted metal fragment from the shoulder, probably from an old fence post. He tossed it aside, eyes scanning the strip for more. Behind him, Ramsey worked in silence. He'd shed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, clearly not just there to observe. He hauled sandbags from the storage shed to reinforce the far edge, checked the windsock, then disappeared briefly to his vehicle and returned with a handheld GPS and flight data tablet. The contrast between old and new would have made Russell chuckle if he wasn't so focused. The future walking beside the past, trying not to trip over it. You know this is still crazy, right? Ramsey said as he returned from checking the wind direction. Even if this works, it'll be the tightest approach a Globemaster's ever attempted outside a war zone. Russell grunted. I don't do crazy. I do necessary. You were always this calm under pressure? Russell didn't answer right away. He was kneeling now, adjusting a wooden stake that marked the eastern edge of the touchdown zone. He tapped it twice to make sure it held, then stood with a wince. Got calm the same way I got this limp, he finally said. One came with the other. There wasn't time to explain it all. The incident in Da Nang, the medevac that never came, the 4-mile hike with a bullet in his leg. Calm wasn't something Russell was born with. It was something he earned the hard way when screaming wouldn't fix a thing. Ramsey squinted at the far end of the strip, then checked his watch. They'll hit the holding pattern in 12 minutes. Captain Blake's expecting either a green light or silence. Russell paused, running a gloved hand across his jaw. Give her the light. You sure? If I wasn't, you'd know. Ramsey tapped the radio mic clipped to his collar. Raven 1, this is home plate. Field is being prepared. I say again, field is being prepared. Stand by for confirmation. A female voice crackled back, distorted but clear. Copy that, home plate. We're turning final pattern at 5,000 feet. ETA on green. Russell stepped toward the edge of the strip and looked skyward. Nothing yet, just wide blue and a few fat-bellied clouds rolling in from the north. He didn't need radar to tell him those clouds weren't friendly. Weather's got teeth, Ramsey muttered. We're going to get boxed in if they don't touch down soon. Russell's response was to walk to the hangar and start dragging out the last piece of gear he hadn't touched in years. A pair of long burn halogen flare cans. Meant for night landings, but in a pinch, they could highlight the end zone even in dim light. "He's still good?" Ramsey asked, half hopeful. "Only one way to find out," Russell replied. He sparked the first canister with a weatherproof match and watched the flame blossom into a pale orange flare, heat rippling off its surface. Then he lit the second. The wind whipped at the flames, but didn't kill them. They stood like sentinels at the end of the gravel strip, daring the sky to challenge their glow. Ramsey's voice buzzed on the radio again. "Raven 1, home plate confirms runway is lit. Wind holding steady from the southeast. Surface is ready for contact. You're cleared to attempt." There was a pause, the kind that stretches just long enough to make your chest tight. Then, "Copy that, home plate. Raven 1 beginning descent." The radio crackled, then went quiet. Russell didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, pupils dilating to chase the first sign of motion. His ears strained, waiting for a sound he hadn't heard in over a decade. And then it came. A distant thunder that wasn't thunder. It didn't roll. It approached. Steady, increasing. The unmistakable drumbeat of 4 Pratt & Whitney turbofans, each pushing over 40,000 pounds of thrust. The C-17 was still miles out, but it was coming fast. Faster than it should have been. Ramsey leaned forward, gripping his headset. "They're on final. Gear down." Russell's jaw tightened. He counted off the seconds, watching the sky for any flicker of metal, any shine of silver cutting through cloud. And yet there it was. Big, low, beastly. The C-17 roared into view like a hammerhead shark rising from the deep. Its nose dipped slightly as it fought the crosswind, its massive bulk seemingly too wide for the narrow strip it now eyed. It moved like something caught between grace and fury, far too large to land where it aimed, but with a pilot bold enough to try anyway. The wind kicked up as it passed overhead, slamming dust into Russell's face. He didn't flinch. His eyes tracked the glide path as if he could adjust it by willpower alone. Then the wheels hit. Dust exploded in every direction. Gravel shifted, even leapt into the air. One of the wooden stakes snapped in two, but the aircraft stayed. It bucked, groaned. Tires screeched across the uneven surface, but it didn't bounce. It held. 3 seconds later, reverse thrusters screamed to life, and the great metal whale began to slow. The tail fishtailed slightly, but the nose stayed true. 100 feet. 80. 50. Then silence. Complete. The engines wound down to an idle hum. The C-17 had landed. Russell let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Not a cheer, not a grin, just a long, slow exhale, like a man who finally sees the last card in a hand he's been holding for years. Ramsey looked at him. "You just made history." Russell didn't answer right away. He walked toward the stopped aircraft, his boots crunching over freshly torn gravel. As he neared the nose, he raised a hand, not to wave, not to salute, just to be seen. The side hatch opened. The crew member leaned out, and Ramsey rushed forward to meet them. Russell stayed back. Let the Air Force boys do their job. Let them unload their precious cargo, cases of oxygen concentrators, mobile hospital units, supplies that could mean the difference between life and death. He didn't need applause, didn't want a medal. The strip had done its job, his job. And in that moment, Russell Stevenson, veteran, caretaker, stubborn as hell, knew this forgotten gravel stretch was no longer just a promise. It was a runway, and it was still open for anyone who needed to land. They didn't waste time. As soon as the C-17 settled, its crew opened the cargo ramp and began unloading with military precision. Forklifts rumbled down the gravel, bouncing with each ridge and the old strip, but holding course. the smell of heated brakes mixed with jet fuel and dust, creating an aroma Russell hadn't tasted in years. An odd cocktail of nostalgia and urgency. Captain Dana Blake was the last to exit the aircraft. She descended the rear ramp slowly, helmet in hand. Sweat streaked across her temples. Her flight suit was smeared with oil and stress. Her face said she hadn't blinked since Idaho. Russell watched her from a short distance, arms folded across his chest. When she finally approached, she extended a hand. "You must be Mr. Stevenson. Thank you for this, for keeping it alive." He took her hand, firm and wordless. Her grip reminded him of someone else, someone younger, more reckless, maybe even himself, 50 years ago. "I didn't keep it alive for thank yous," he said. "Just didn't know how to bury it." Behind them, Ramsey directed a medical crew unloading a mobile triage unit. They moved fast, voices clipped but calm, every motion practiced. The cargo wasn't just machines. It was life support. Vital systems that had to be driven another 40 miles through canyon roads to a flood-stricken community where 2 hospitals had gone dark overnight. Russell noticed one of the ground crew limping. Young guy, maybe mid-20s, left leg dragging slightly behind. It was subtle. Probably most wouldn't notice. But Russell always saw limps. They told stories. "You all right, son?" he asked. The kid blinked, surprised. "Yeah, Afghanistan. Shrapnel got the calf." Russell nodded. "You're favoring the wrong side. Try easing weight across the hips, not the knee. You'll get more stride back that way." The young man paused, then gave a small nod. "Thanks, sir." Russell didn't reply. He just returned to his post by the flare cans, now smoldering like old campfires, their urgency spent. Blake joined him. "This place? It shouldn't be here, not on any active list. I ran the airfield logs last night before we diverted. Your strip came up as decommissioned, status unresolved. Nobody's touched that tag since 2002. I didn't ask their permission to keep it open," Russell said. "Didn't close the gates either." She looked down the length of the gravel path. Dust was still settling. "There's no way a bird this size should have made that landing." "But it did." "You planned for that?" "I prepared for a day no one thought would come," he said. "That's different from planning. Planning is what you do when you have options. Preparing is what you do when you don't." Blake stared at him like she was seeing through skin and bone, straight into the old, stubborn engine underneath. "Your generation," she said. "You never quit." "Not all of us. Some just quit louder." From the edge of the airstrip, a convoy of county EMT vehicles and National Guard trucks pulled in, led by a state patrol cruiser kicking up a ribbon of dust. Local volunteers poured out of the beds of pickups, moving like ants with purpose, quickly transferring crates from military hands into civilian ones. Ramsey walked over, sweat streaking his forehead. "Sheriff wants to speak with you." "Me?" Ramsey nodded. "Says you're the property owner, and the one who technically made this possible." Russell sighed, rolling his neck. "Let's get it over with." He followed Ramsey toward the growing crowd where the sheriff, a woman in her early 50s with short-cropped silver hair and mirrored sunglasses, stood next to her vehicle, radio at her belt, arms crossed. She looked like someone who didn't waste words. "Mr. Stevenson," she said. "Heard about what you pulled off." "Didn't pull anything," he replied. "Just kept what was mine." "Well," she said, nodding at the airstrip behind him, "it's become a little more than that now." "How so?" "The governor's office is en route. FEMA too. You're on about 20 different social media videos already. That landing's going viral, people calling it a miracle. Got folks from D.C. already asking how a retired veteran maintained an illegal strip capable of handling a military-grade emergency touchdown." Russell rolled his eyes. "It's not illegal, just abandoned." She chuckled once. "Well, today, it's a hero's ground. Problem is, when something becomes heroic, it also becomes contested." Russell didn't like the sound of that. "You're telling me they'll try to take it?" I'm telling you they might try to recognize it, she said, which comes with strings, red tape, maybe even acquisition. Hell, they might want to federalize it now. Ramsey stepped in. It's still private land, isn't it? For now, she said. But that won't stop the suits from circling. Russell looked over the land he'd kept alive with scraped knuckles and half-worn boots, a place his father once called the last honest dirt in the county. They didn't care about it when it was just me and the coyotes, he muttered, but now they'll show up with flags and forms. That's how it goes, she said. You save a life, and they show up to write the story their way. Russell didn't answer. He just turned and walked back toward the hangar. Blake was waiting for him by the fuel drums. I heard. Of course you did. They'll try to make you a symbol, she said. You okay with that? He didn't stop walking. I didn't do it for a story. Then why? She asked. Russell turned to her, standing still, framed by the skeleton of the hangar behind him. Because once, a long time ago, I watched my father pour his last paycheck into leveling this strip. He said someday someone would land here who had nowhere else to go. I guess today was the day. Blake took a slow breath. I don't know what they're going to offer you, but if they ask me, I'll tell them this place didn't just save our mission, it changed it. Russell gave a tired smile. You don't owe me that. No, she said, but I owe it to the kid who waved at you from a hill 30 years ago. They stood there in silence for a while. The convoy rumbled away into the distance. The C-17's engines began their post-mission cool down, hissing like a dragon going to sleep. Sunlight bounced off the dust in the air, turning the scene into something almost mythic. A strip of cracked gravel, a forgotten hangar. A man who never gave up. And above it all, the sky, open again. Russell wasn't the kind of man who smiled for the camera. So when the media vans showed up the next morning, rumbling through the trees with satellite dishes spinning like they were searching for the truth in the air, he did what he always did. Put on a pot of coffee and got back to work. He was patching the fence on the south end of the property when the first reporter found him. Young woman, polished voice, perfect teeth. She asked if he'd be willing to do a segment on the miracle landing. He gave her a look that made her clipboard wilt. No miracles here, he said, hammering a new plank into place. Just preparation and a little bit of faith. Faith in what? In gravel, he said flatly, and good pilots. She didn't quite know what to do with that. By midday there were 8 cars parked along the dirt road, all kicked up with dust and hopeful angles. A few county workers came out with measuring tapes. A man from the FAA with a clipboard of his own did 3 full loops of the runway, muttering to himself about regulatory nightmares and unregistered brilliance. A local school bus parked on the hill just to give kids a chance to see the big bird still resting on the strip. Teachers handed out worksheets about aerodynamics, while one little boy kept asking if Russell was like a cowboy for airplanes. And through it all, Russell kept working, sweeping out the hangar, replacing the bulbs on the weather beacon that hadn't been operational in 10 years, painting over the rust on the old fuel drum that hadn't been used since Clinton was in office. Ramsey showed up just after lunch, this time out of uniform, a ball cap pulled low and sleeves rolled up. He helped with the beacon, then sat on the hood of his truck while Russell rolled paint in silence. You know they're going to want to name it after you, right? Russell paused, roller mid-stroke. They shouldn't. Too late. Governor's office called it Stevenson Field in this morning's press release. He grunted. I didn't ask for that. Didn't ask for the landing either, Ramsey said. But you made it possible. You gave us a place when we had none. Russell finished the last stroke, then stepped back to look at the new coat. Bright white on battered metal. I didn't do this to be remembered, he muttered. I know, Ramsey said, but you will be. For a long moment Russell just stared out at the strip. It was different now, not because of the landing, but because it had become known. And once a place is known, it no longer belongs only to the one who kept it alive. Later that evening, after the media packed up and the officials left, a letter was hand-delivered to the house. The man who brought it was in a black suit, but he didn't have the slick confidence of a politician. Just quiet reverence. Said it came straight from the president's office. Russell opened it with shaking hands. And it wasn't just a thank you. It was recognition. The letter confirmed that Stevenson Field would be registered as an auxiliary emergency strip under federal jurisdiction, but the land would remain privately owned. Maintenance grants would be provided, but only if Russell wanted them. He could deny access to anyone outside of emergency flights. It was, in plain language, a choice. And for once, it was his. He folded the letter carefully, then slid it into the drawer beside a dog-eared photo of his father, standing beside the first windsock they'd planted. 2 days later, Captain Dana Blake returned, not as a pilot on a mission, but as someone carrying a box of donuts and wearing a leather bomber jacket. She parked beside the hangar and leaned against her truck like it was just another Sunday visit. "I had a feeling you'd still be out here," she said. "Where else would I be?" They stood together, watching as a small prop plane from the neighboring town circled lazily above, then banked away toward the mountains. "I wanted to give you something," she said, pulling a patch from her jacket pocket. It was the unit insignia from the mission, 445th Airlift Wing. Underneath it, in stitched gold letters, "No runway, no problem." Russell took it in silence, then nodded once and slipped it into his shirt pocket. "Don't have much use for patches," he said, "but I'll keep this one. They're turning this landing into doctrine, you know. Training scenario. The Stevenson protocol." He shook his head, amused. "All because someone didn't check the weather. All because someone believed a forgotten strip could save lives." She hesitated, then added more softly, "It reminded me why I started flying in the first place." That night, Russell didn't sleep. Not out of restlessness, but reflection. He walked the strip again after dusk, lantern in hand. The gravel crunched like it always had. The stars above blinked without agenda. And for the first time in years, the place felt not just preserved, but complete. It had fulfilled its purpose. At the halfway point of the runway, he paused, closed his eyes, listened. In the silence, he didn't hear ghosts. He heard gratitude. The next morning brought more mail. Cards from schoolchildren, hand-drawn planes, notes from families in the flood zone who'd received the life-saving supplies that had come through his field. One note simply said, "Thank you for giving the sky a place to land." And Russell, standing on his porch with coffee in hand and tears he'd never admit to, let the sun warm his shoulders as he read every one. A few weeks later, the C-17 finally departed. It took off at dawn, low and loud, every inch of its departure watched by the same town that had ignored the airstrip for years. As it rose into the horizon, Russell didn't wave, but he did smile, and that was enough. Because now they all knew. Some men keep things alive not for attention, but for the moment someone else needs it most. And when the world needed a place to land, Russell Stevenson was ready.